Being Satoshi Nakamoto, the mysterious creator of Bitcoin.
This video summarizes one of the possible more than 60 candidates covered in my comprehensive No Stone Left Unturned investigation, Satoshi Nakamoto and the Origins of Bitcoin. The book is available in various electronic and print formats on Amazon and Shopify under the displayed links. Satoshi Nakamoto seemingly launched out of nowhere. This only refers to his online handle. The real person behind the pseudonym was surely involved in related technologies and ecosystems in the years leading up to Bitcoin. This highly gifted individual must have inevitably left some more or less telling breadcrumbs along his path. In order to know what to look for, we screened the entire Bitcoin whitepaper as well as early posts by its author and filtered for its most frequent non-trivial words. These will be displayed in the title and abstract on the right-hand side. The heading of this 2008 article already contains peer-to-peer and electronic cash, later followed by payments and transactions. Furthermore, technical terms like digital signatures, trusted third party, double spending, distributed or network timestamping, hashing, longest or ongoing chain of blocks, proof of work, network nodes, CPU power, and attacking. Further buzzwords not shown here but spread throughout other parts of Satoshi Nakamoto's communication are currency, coins and escrow, decentralization, open source, and messages, as well as anonymity, pseudonymity, and privacy. After looking into its specific terminology and jargon, let's establish the most likely ideological pillars of Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin construct. These are a libertarian mindset, freedom of speech, Austrian economics, decentralization of power, and a cypherpunk ethos. Related wordings he surprisingly never used, at least not literally, in his known communication as Satoshi Nakamoto were Austrian economics itself, sound money, free market, cypherpunk, crypto-anarchism, and freedom of speech. This points to a comparatively unpolitical persona, Satoshi Nakamoto. Overview of Bitcoin's tech stack. Several of its foundational technologies are anchored in classical cryptography, which was primarily developed in the 1970s and 80s. These are hashing, digital signatures, and Merkle trees. In the following 1990s and 2000s, several applications were added which played an important role for the emergence of Bitcoin. These elements were electronic payment systems, trusted digital timestamping, and P2P file sharing, as well as proof of work and hashcash. Complementary applications supporting Satoshi Nakamoto's online anonymity were PGP for email encryption, Tor onion routing, and potentially anonymous remailers. Some of these components even tied to Bitcoin whitepaper references such as Merkle trees to 7, eCash systems to 1 and 6, and trusted digital timestamping to 2, 3, 4, and 5. The discovery of 2, which essentially cites 3 to 5, might have been Satoshi Nakamoto's game-changing trigger for getting on track with Bitcoin in the second half of the 2000s. Regarding his programming, it is likely that Satoshi Nakamoto preferentially resorted to C++ libraries which he had dabbled with before or even employed in previous projects. His inaugural Bitcoin code version 0.1, released in early January 2009, linked OpenSSL for encryption, BerkeleyDB as database, Boost for enhanced C++ capabilities, WX widget for graphics, and libevent. So these elements can be regarded as stylometric signatures of his coding. Additional traces to Satoshi Nakamoto's background in cryptography are the cryptographic methods and encoding algorithms he selected for Bitcoin. These are RIPEMD 160 and SHA-256 as constituents for Bitcoin's characteristic double hashing to produce safe Bitcoin addresses, ECDSA with SecP256K1 parameters in digital signatures for secure transactions, and base 56 check for character encoding. Satoshi Nakamoto's general pool of advanced computer skills, which played a role in Bitcoin, comprised a wide and diverse range of elements. Bitcoin's initial release was exclusively issued on the Microsoft Windows platform, likely because of its broad installation base for promoting the peer-to-peer paradigm underlying vital decentralization. He still appeared to have good knowledge of Unix-style operating systems like Linux and FreeBSD, but was apparently not a passionate Mac evangelist. He coded Bitcoin in C++, based on the GCC compiler collection within MingW and MSVC environments. For document generation, he used the free OpenOffice.org package, but neither utilized, at least not as Satoshi Nakamoto, the dominantly installed Microsoft Word or the academically preferred LaTeX typesetting software. The creator of Bitcoin also proved to be versed in network computing, computer hardware, privacy-enhancing technologies like Tor onion routing and PGP derivatives, cross-platform and security coding, as well as Force-like scripting for Bitcoin's virtual machine and GPU mining. Satoshi Nakamoto repeatedly emphasized the pivotal role of peer-to-peer concepts at the core of his Bitcoin and privacy-enhancing technologies shortcuts. He resorted to several related tools and applications. In file sharing, the architect of Bitcoin referred to the landmark projects Gnutella, Napster, and BitTorrent. As already pointed out, the online anonymity schemes he recommended or even employed for shielding his own identity and location were the GNU Privacy Guard implementation of Phil Zimmermann's PGP and Tor onion routing technology, which emerged from the DARPA-funded Freehaven project with MIT. Astonishingly, Satoshi Nakamoto never referenced anonymous remailers, which were central to the cypherpunk movement since its beginning in the 1990s. By drawing conclusions from his technical achievements as well as his posts and messaging with the community, a draft of Satoshi Nakamoto's personality and mindset can be attempted. The creator of Bitcoin was certainly a genius of high intelligence, equipped with solid self-confidence, exceptional motivation, and outstanding resolve for delivery, while favoring pragmatism over strict dogmatism. He declared himself a libertarian, but not a socialist. A moderate, but not an extreme cypherpunk spirit is underpinned by his apparent deprioritization of a personal business objective, as well as Bitcoin's algorithmically enforced deflationary policy. Satoshi Nakamoto very likely pertained to Generation X, probably born along the 1970s. He might be characterized as a so-called Sigma male, a more contemplative lone wolf character with a well-discernible introvert streak. He displayed a strong community spirit and communicated in an appreciative, polite, and patient manner with others, but was also reported to present a rather bossy attitude towards early volunteering co-developers. As common for many highly intelligent individuals, the inventor of Bitcoin might exhibit a slight mental condition. Some early developers, such as Gavin Andreessen, hinted a few of Satoshi Nakamoto's ostensible knowledge gaps. Among these were the legal implications of issuing Bitcoin, Bitcoin's rather poor transaction privacy, and the technical risks of penny flooding attacks, as well as the significant challenge of scaling and bootstrapping the Bitcoin network. Have been noticed for Satoshi Nakamoto. His diligently executed online privacy and hiding behind a likely fake Japanese pseudonym indicate a strong emphasis on OPSEC. The extremely rare typos, his consistent application of grammatical contractions and double spaces after period, as well as his apparent stinginess with his opulent BTC fortunes, suggest an orderliness-driven mindset. The provision of a placeholder for a poker client in Bitcoin source code, his assumed brain gains via possibly embedded hidden messages in the setup of Bitcoin and his online persona, as well as his occasionally reported salient behavior being rather bossy with volunteer developers, while patient and polite when dealing with others, reflect a typical signature of a genius. Satoshi Nakamoto's so far unexplained approach to the more socially focused P2P foundation would match a pronounced community spirit, while a citation of the oldest, poorly documented 1957 edition of a textbook as reference 8 in the Bitcoin whitepaper might indicate a passion for history of science. From his demonstrated competences and recorded communication, a draft of his likely job environment and career stage in the later 2000s can be attempted. His ability to, probably single-handedly, plan and deliver a complex IT project as well as the content of certain posts point to a seasoned C++ programmer. Having the headspace for pulling off his moonshot at Bitcoin would have required sufficient headspace during Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin years around 2008 to 2010, possibly involving some sort of discontinuity in his personal, social, or professional life. Certain features in Bitcoin, as well as his energy and willingness to take extreme risk, would be typical for an early career academic or postgraduate researcher, but very unlikely for a senior or C-suite executive. He might have made his money at the time through freelancing or contract work. Following some of Satoshi Nakamoto's own statements and verbiage, he was not a legal or financial professional either. What also strikes is Satoshi Nakamoto's evidently deliberate orchestration of his pseudonym. He chose a rather inconspicuous regular Japanese name as his identity for his various online accounts. While there has been frequent speculation of an embedded message, this would be too deeply hidden to be unambiguously discernible. Typical internet handles commonly use a fictional name for getting across a certain message, for instance with a fun, technical, ideological, or political connotation. It also remains obscure why Satoshi Nakamoto opted to explicitly specify Japanese nationality and a concrete date of birth on the profile of his account at the P2P Foundation. Speculated reasonings for pretending to be Japanese might be rooted in the country's strong cryptographer scene throughout academia and industry, thus bestowing credibility to his nationality claim. This would be commensurate with his pick of a Japanese ISP for Bitcoin.org, as well as the registration of his personal web accounts, for instance at anonymouspeech.com. These choices were probably caused by the very favorable privacy legislation in Japan. These are expressions and phrases recorded from the creator of Bitcoin. While many of these examples might be well familiar to individuals born and raised in non-English speaking countries, especially Satoshi Nakamoto's confidence and range in their active use clearly point to a native speaker. Here are examples of Satoshi Nakamoto's blended British-American spelling. Given that he was very likely a highly educated native speaker, he would have naturally avoided to rather randomly flip between the two modes. Therefore, the creator of Bitcoin might have deliberately deployed such cross-Atlantic orthography as adversarial stylometry within his refined operational security toolbox. Here are instances of the computer jargon used by Satoshi Nakamoto. As expected, this collection reflects his deep and long-term immersion into IT-savvy communities. The financial terms occasionally floated by Satoshi Nakamoto suggest that he had good knowledge of some basics, but that he was not professionally anchored in the financial industry. For example, he was neither a traditional banker nor a full-time Wall Street broker. Following diagrams display Satoshi Nakamoto's online activity patterns, which will be used in an attempt to pinpoint his main residence during his Bitcoin years from 2008 to 2011. Here, with reference to Eastern Time Zone in North America, his daily online activities on Bitcoin start at significant levels at about 10 a.m. to peak in the early afternoon, while slightly tapering into the evening with rare outskirts into the post-midnight hours. Shifting this daily schedule from Eastern to Pacific or European time zones would be less compatible with the requirements of coordination with a regular daytime job, for instance, at a university. When focusing in isolation on his email exchange with early Bitcoin adopter Martti Malmi from Finland, the time logs proved to be incompatible with a life along normal daylight hours in a European country on the eastern end of the Atlantic Ocean. Regarding Satoshi Nakamoto's online activities registered between 2008 and spring 2011, we see an hourly and calendric spread of data points here plotted with reference to Eastern North American time zone. Satoshi Nakamoto's seasonal absences could be linked to academic or professional commitments, for instance as a freelancer, or even private holidays. However, the statistical relevance is of course too poor to validate annual repetition. Note also the clustering of post-midnight logs on the web end of November 2009, late winter and summer 2010. There are many possible Bitcoin or non-Bitcoin related reasons for these bunches, such as all-in work on the Bitcoin project, days off, or short-term travel to the West Coast. Fine resolution of the dataset also reveals that Satoshi Nakamoto stayed rather silent during the traditional Christian end-of-year holidays, thus supporting residence and cultural affinity to a country following Western culture in America or Europe. A weekday-weekend analysis of Satoshi Nakamoto's crazy hour activity logged between midnight and 6 a.m. further backs his main residence in North American time zones, with slightly elevated frequency on Saturdays and Sundays. Such pattern would comply with Satoshi Nakamoto's occasional pointers to a regular job keeping him mainly busy between Monday and Friday, while having more time for Bitcoin on weekends. When looking at Satoshi Nakamoto's overall daily activity pattern, though, there is no significant accumulation on weekends. When referencing to Eastern time zone, slightly pronounced peaks are recorded on Thursdays and Sundays. So Bitcoin development might have been Satoshi Nakamoto's passionately pursued 7-day-a-week hobby during periods of less intensive work commitments. His annual activity pattern, which is mainly based on 2010 data, shows well-pronounced peaks around the month of July and August, and a well-discernible trough around April. These seasonal variations would be well commensurate with Satoshi Nakamoto's previously assumed university affiliation, for which he needed to follow a typical academic calendar with busy exam periods at the end of the spring term before an extended lecture-free summer period. Note the poor statistical support for these conclusions, though. Mixed location signatures are observed for Satoshi Nakamoto during his online life extending between 2008 and 2011. Digital traces are registered from 3 continents. The majority of them is associated with North America, for instance regarding the specific switch schedules of daylight savings time. Detailed analysis of the activity pattern suggests that he resided on the western side of the Atlantic Ocean, most likely on or near the East Coast. In the metadata recorded along the stage-wise release of the Bitcoin whitepaper and code, different North American geotags were discovered, most notably the Pacific time zone found in a draft version from the 3rd of October 2008 and a publicly shared error log from the 10th of January 2009. Astonishingly, the metadata in the official PDF of the Bitcoin whitepaper featured what is likely representing Mountain Time Zone along the Rockies. Bitcoin's inaugural post from the 31st of October 2008 was labeled in Eastern Time Zone, but that entry most likely represents the site of the newsgroup server. As pointed out before, these North American time zones would comply with a native level speaker of American English. Hints connected to the UK and Europe are sprinkles of British orthography and phrases in Satoshi Nakamoto's writings, the quotation of the Times of London in Bitcoin's Genesis Block 0, citation 2 in the Bitcoin white paper from a small local symposium in the Benelux which attracted only about 50 European participants, and the occasional usage of European date and currency format, as well as more vaguely a reference to electric heating. In an Asian context, filings of Satoshi Nakamoto's email accounts and websites to Japanese internet service providers, as well as the usage of a file server with a top-level domain from the UAE can be listed. However, despite of his Japanese pseudonym, it is likely that the architect of Bitcoin neither grew up in the Far East nor that he had his main residence in Asia. On top of these well-documented digital geotags, there were further, more anecdotal, weakly evidenced real-world or online sightings of the person behind the moniker Satoshi Nakamoto. In the pre-Bitcoin era, it has been surmised that he was an attendee of the Financial Cryptography Conference held in February 2000 at the island of Anguilla, a British overseas territory in the West Indies. In 2002, a couple of messages were posted on a UK-related financial news group at Google, which alluded to important Bitcoin features years before its launch in 2008. According to unverifiable statements, their sender's IP address was traced back to the Netherlands. In June 2005, a person described as a dark-haired man with a backpack, probably a graduate student, was reported to have been looking for a programmer to help with writing the code for the client software of a coin-producing blockchain. This encounter happened at the quadrennial HackerCon What the Hack, which took place at a campground in the Netherlands. After the creator of Bitcoin must have already departed from the Bitcoin community in April 2011, a visit by a delegation from the Department of Homeland Security has been said to have met a Team Satoshi in California. While meticulously trying to occlude his past and his objectives for the future, some very rare hints slipped through Satoshi Nakamoto's privacy shield. On June 17, 2010, he mentioned the tremendous variety of possible transaction types that I designed years ago, which might refer to an early career stint at an eCash project in academia or industry. Regarding his specific choice of SecP 256K1 parameters for Bitcoin's ECC-based digital signatures, Satoshi Nakamoto is reported to have divulged, "I had a bunch of people look at it and they told me it was good," which likely points towards his embedding in a strong cryptographer scene during Bitcoin development. With his unglamorous, probably strategically planned departure from the Bitcoin community in 2011, at least as Satoshi Nakamoto, he reasoned to have moved on to other things. This could be interpreted as starting an academic or entrepreneurial career. Major clues to the person behind the moniker Satoshi Nakamoto can be derived from the rather short and unusual composition of the 8 references in Bitcoin's seminal white paper from fall 2008. Here's a potential itinerary which the creator of Bitcoin might have taken to arrive at these particular references. Unavoidably, the line of argumentation portrayed here is unfortunately a bit complicated, so you might want to pause this video at times. First of all, it is reasonable to assume that Satoshi Nakamoto knew the influential cypherpunk Adam Back and his Hashcash, which dated back to the second half of the 1990s. Back then directly referred Satoshi Nakamoto to Wei Dai about his pioneering work on B-money, thus providing a straightforward avenue to the white paper citations 6 and 1. The giant elephant in the room is how Satoshi Nakamoto could have become aware of the second citation, which was from a local symposium on general computer science without any emphasis on cryptography. This very small meeting was held in May 1999 in a tiny village just south of Leuven in Belgium. While an ISBN was registered for its proceedings, they were neither digitized nor uploaded to a web server in the pre-Bitcoin era. Consequently, the contents of the book did not possess a DOI, which would have made the cited article far more widely searchable and retrievable. Reference 2 was hence mainly available as a physical hard copy to the only about 50 mostly regional participants, plus a handful of visitors from the continent. The booklet was carried by only a few select libraries, which were primarily located in the Benelux, but importantly not by other common academic institutions in Europe, and even less across the Atlantic. Yet there is a possible alternative how Satoshi Nakamoto could have arrived at his citation too. A paper with a similar title was published by the same group at a workshop which took place just a few weeks later in June 1999 at Stanford. Various library catalogs in North America, for instance at Stanford itself, New York University or Princeton, feature its proceedings, which also possess a DOI. This sister publication actually presented what is likely the only widely retrievable citation of two from the 1999 Benelux Symposium. It strikes that Satoshi Nakamoto also omitted the page number in his white paper, indicating that he directly adopted the citation from the Stanford proceedings without being able to get his fingers on the original at the time. Was this maneuver a razzle-dazzle to occlude his home base? Even more, the sister publication also contained the third and fourth references of the white paper, however with slight bibliographic deviations. After becoming aware of them, Satoshi Nakamoto probably downloaded these widely available articles to verify the validity of their bibliographic data and corrected these two entries accordingly. Via this sister publication from the 1999 Stanford workshop, the creator of Bitcoin could have just discovered the groundbreaking research on digital timestamping by Haber and Stornetta, whose work may not have been on his screen at the time. Due to its critical role in the timestamping at the heart of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto went on to search for their more recent publications and included citation 5 of the white paper, which was stocked in most academic libraries. Merkle trees in citation 7 were well known to computer scientists, in particular to those with specialization in cryptography. Yet its particular white paper reference 7 was not so commonly cited. A potential route to 7 would have been via the 4th and 5th citations of the Bitcoin white paper, where Merkle's 1980 publication was also quoted. Satoshi Nakamoto evidently adopted their final page number 133, while Merkle's original document extends to page 134. This mismatch supports the hypothesis that he retrieved the bibliographic data of reference 7 by copy and pasting from 4 or 5. The final citation in Bitcoin's epochal document quotes a standard textbook by the Austro-American father of probability theory, William Feller. What strikes is the reference to its edition from 1957, which was rarely catalogued in libraries across America and Europe. Note, however, that in his later years between 1950 and 70, Feller was a professor at Princeton where, for instance, this antiquated edition is carried in its local library. Overall, proper citation of the traditional references 2 to 5, 7, and 8 in the Bitcoin white paper required paywall barrier-free, unfettered access by Satoshi Nakamoto to the physical and online catalog of a well-stocked institutional library, in most cases from within a renowned university. This would require formal academic affiliation. Matching his previously derived characteristics, the creator of Bitcoin was likely a postgraduate student, postdoctoral researcher, or junior academic. These findings suggest that Satoshi Nakamoto was working at a university, at least while developing Bitcoin in the years 2007 to 2008. Satoshi Nakamoto apparently minimized mentions of other individuals in his messages, probably in another effort to mitigate traces to his network and thus to his own identity. A notable and rare exception is his hint to David Hopwood's work on group signatures for key blinding, posted on August 13, 2010 at the Bitcoin Forum. This British cryptographer seems to be the only person outside Bitcoin's immediate context floated by Satoshi Nakamoto. However, it is unclear whether this finding has any meaning other than that Hopwood was probably not a crony of Satoshi Nakamoto. A legendary hallmark of Satoshi Nakamoto's online life was the eternalization of the headline of the Times of London in Bitcoin's Genesis Block 0. This punchline reads, "The Times, 3rd of January 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." The remarkable thematic coincidence with the goals of his Bitcoin project and the striking technical parallels to timestamping via displaying cryptographic hashes in the New York Times as pioneered by Haber and Stornetta in the 1990s was probably too tempting for Satoshi Nakamoto to be missed out. Note that there was no placeholder embossing any text in the pre-release version of the Bitcoin code from mid-November 2008. For gauging the relevance of this headline to the creator of Bitcoin, it is important to point out that this very text featured exclusively on the front page of the UK print edition, but not on the international and online versions of this prestigious center-right newspaper. Outside Great Britain, this edition of the Times of London was stocked in the shelves of some European and only select American libraries. Thus, chances are that the UK print edition was not directly available to the creator of Bitcoin from the other side of the Atlantic on January 3rd. Yet it is well conceivable that, in order to fortify his sophisticated identity shield, Satoshi Nakamoto may have made an effort to find the headline of its original UK print edition from a third source in the 6 days before starting actual mining with Block 1 on January 8, 2009. Here comes a closer look at this mining gap. In Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC, the Genesis block was registered on Saturday, January 3, 2009 at 18:15, which corresponds to 1:15 p.m. in Eastern Time Zone. Note that this block was not mined, but its timestamp and text message with the newspaper headline were directly programmed into Bitcoin's C++ source code. Satoshi Nakamoto only issued the first mined block 1 on Friday, January 9 at 2:54 UTC, which was 9:54 p.m. on the evening of the preceding Thursday. The corresponding delay of more than 6 days has never been conclusively explained, yet it might be reasoned that, due to the previously outlined challenge of getting hold of the UK print edition of the Times of London from outside Great Britain, especially from the USA or Canada, Satoshi Nakamoto might have backdated the Genesis block to forge a nice storyline. Note also that especially the launch of mining would have been more sleep compatible with Satoshi Nakamoto's residence on the evening of January 8 in North America, rather than at 3 or 4 a.m. in the following morning according to the Western or Central European clocks. It is very reasonable to assume that the persona Satoshi Nakamoto was only a strategic construct, a well-designed virtual vehicle to safeguard Bitcoin's important origin myth and, as a key part of it, the identity of its creator. Still, his competences and outcomes, unambiguously demonstrated for making the whole Bitcoin package happen, were unforgeable and can thus be firmly linked to its ingenious architect. These are his ideals-driven mindset, his determination to fully deliver on a complex software project, as well as an altruistic attitude and pragmatic rather than strictly dogmatic approach. Furthermore, we're talking about a native English speaker with some sort of transatlantic reach. The inventor of Bitcoin certainly possessed high intelligence, a rather introvert character, and sported a libertarian political stance. He was versed in applied cryptography, privacy-enhancing technologies, and operation security. His range of expertise comprised of electronic cash and at least some basic knowledge of money and banking, economics, and statistics. Regarding computing, he wielded significant competence in C, C++, and security programming, peer-to-peer networks, internet protocols, the Microsoft Windows operating system, cross-platform coding, and hardware. Finally, he must have had at least indirect access to the proceedings of the 1999 Benelux Symposium for producing the whitepaper reference to, the UK print edition of the Times of London from the 3rd of January 2009 to engrave a headline from its front page in Bitcoin's Genesis block, and to the antiquated 1957 edition of a standard textbook showing up as the 8th edition in his whitepaper. We now plot a world map which locates the previously compiled evidence as well as organizations, industry, or non-institutionalized players with potential relevance to the creation of Bitcoin. We start with Japan. The chosen pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto overtly suggests Japanese nationality. In addition, he registered most of his email accounts as well as Bitcoin.org to Tokyo-based internet service providers. Somewhat surprisingly, a project report issued by the Bank of Japan around the turn of the millennium displayed stunning overlap between some core technological elements of what later became Bitcoin. However, there are no other substantial traces linked to this Far Eastern country which are attributable to the creator of Bitcoin. Several North American geotags are spread across a set of metadata deposited by Satoshi Nakamoto. A thorough activity pattern analysis indicates his home stake in or near Eastern Time Zone. Satoshi Nakamoto also shifted daylight savings time according to the American schedule, which would assign Mountain Time Zone for UTC-6 to the official Bitcoin whitepaper version from the 24th of March 2009. Yet its pre-release draft circulated in early October 2008 showed Pacific time zone. An at least temporary West Coast location would also be compatible with the epicenter of the cypherpunk movement in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as with Satoshi Nakamoto's IP address from Greater Los Angeles, as revealed in an error log posted by Halfeni in January 2009. Already in the 1990s up to Bitcoin in 2008, there were also numerous world-class cryptography groups affiliated with universities across the entire USA and Canada, for example at Stanford on the west and MIT on the east coast, as well as several cutting-edge commercialization initiatives at companies such as ZKS in Montreal, RSA, PGP, Cryptography Research, and Counterpane. So this intracontinental multi-location pattern in combination with Satoshi Nakamoto's flawless, native speaker-grade, predominantly American English provide a rather coherent pool of evidence that the mastermind of Bitcoin was based in the US or Canada between 2008 and 2011. Yet there are also cues supporting Satoshi Nakamoto's residence on the other side of the Atlantic, in particular the United Kingdom. First of all, there is evidently the headline from the UK print edition of the Times of London of the 3rd of January 2009, which Satoshi Nakamoto included in Bitcoin's Genesis block. There is also occasionally interspersed British orthography and slang, seemingly supporting his association with the UK. England also boasted a high-caliber cryptography scene, notably around the University of Cambridge and its nearby Microsoft Research. Another important company from Britain was Ian Griggs Systemics. Furthermore, there is of course the telling whitepaper reference to an article presented at a small local symposium which took place in May 1999 in the Benelux. The countries of Belgium and the Netherlands have been powerful players in the field of cryptography for a long time, and the developments of CWI and David Chaum's DigiCash at Amsterdam during the 1990s were important precursors of Bitcoin. Other local powerhouses are TU Eindhoven's EIPSI and COSIC at Leuven. Satoshi Nakamoto's other European signature was his usage of European currency and date format. We have thus established a transatlantic triangle of evidence for the location of the creator of Bitcoin spanning between North America, the UK, and the Benelux. Other potentially relevant developments took place in Scandinavia, in particular at the University of Aarhus in Denmark, as well as at companies like the nearby Cryptomathic, which also ran operations at Cambridge. An astonishingly ample collection of traces to Bitcoin were pointing to Estonia. Their very innovative e-Estonia agenda for public administration, which was already launched in the mid-1990s, has leapfrogged the small Baltic country to the forefront of nations in the digital arena. The local ecosystem comprises of the universities of Tallinn and Tartu, as well as companies such as X-Road, Blue Moon, and Guardtime. Some of their early research papers appeared to preempt blockchain technology and already listed many of Satoshi Nakamoto's whitepaper citations, especially those regarding timestamping, well before the announcement of Bitcoin on 31st of October 2008. Here comes a plot of the approximate geographical distribution of a slightly extended pool of researchers who worked on topics with potential relevance to Bitcoin across different organizations and ecosystems. For each region, you will see first the organizations and then the associated individuals. USA and Canada, the Benelux, United Kingdom, Scandinavia, Estonia, Israel, and Japan. detailed analysis of all available evidence makes it possible to now draw a hierarchically structured chart of more or less plausible candidates for the creator of Bitcoin. Note that only one of them can be Satoshi Nakamoto, though all others are not. We start with the usual suspects, which have been extensively covered in numerous videos, web pages, social media posts, and blogs. While they were undoubtedly key for paving the road towards Bitcoin, my comprehensive research concludes that none of them was directly involved in its creation. At the very bottom, we list the founders and OGs of cryptography and the cypherpunk scene. Then I drop a couple of names in first, second, third, and fourth layers. Finally, we reach the upper rank where several very credible Satoshi Nakamoto candidates are found. Outside this chart, the only option is that the architect of Bitcoin was a Secret Service or corporately trained expert, and less likely an unlisted junior academic, college student, or an exceptionally gifted hobbyist. For the full information and analysis of the content presented in this video, as well as detailed coverage of about 60 further candidates, I highly recommend my book Satoshi Nakamoto and the Origins of Bitcoin. It is available electronically and in printed form at Amazon and Shopify under the displayed links.